Hi everyone, it's Miss Mary and welcome to Super Skills for Kids. Let's get started with our hello song. Hello friends, hello friends, hello friends. It's time to say hello. Hello my friends. Well, today we are going to talk about the letter O. Okay. This is an uppercase O and this is a lowercase o. What do you think? Do they look pretty similar? They look very similar, except one is bigger and one is smaller. And they look pretty easy to make, don't they? They're circles. We're going to start at the top for the uppercase O, and we're going to go around and back up. Okay, so just around in a circle and back to the top, and that's an uppercase O. A lowercase o is the same thing, only it's smaller. Start at the top, make a circle around, and we're done. Now, how does O sound? O has a couple of ways to sound. It can sound like its name, O, and those are sounds like orca, or overcoat, or oatmeal. But it can also have a different sound that's like an ah sound, like octopus, or otter, or ox, or our word of the day, our O word of the day, owl. So that's called a short owl, a short O sound, ah. Okay. So today we are going to make an owl. We're going to do some stamping and make our own owl. And we're also going to read a book about an owl, which is called Good Night Owl, and it's written and all the pictures are done by Greg Pizzoli. So let's start our book, Good Night Owl. Okay. Good Night Owl looks like it's nighttime, doesn't it? There's Owl looking outside. Owl was settling into bed when he heard a noise. And down here, looks like it's under his bed, there's a little word that says, squeak. It was a tiny sound, no louder than a whisper. A funny noise he hadn't heard before. Someone must be at the door, said Owl. Just a minute. Yeah. What do you see there? But no one was there. Probably the wind, said Owl. And he lay down in bed and said to himself, Good night, Owl. Squeak! He heard the noise again. Who's making that noise? Is it that little extra creature we saw in that picture? It's coming from the cupboard, said Owl. So he went to take a look. And there's his cupboard. It's got a lot of things on the shelf, and there's probably some things in here. He emptied every shelf, but there was no noise to be found. Now, how does his room look now, his living room? Kind of messy. So Owl went back to bed. Good night, Owl, he said. And then he heard the noise. Squeak! It must be under the floor, said Owl. Looks like he's looking down there, huh? And he pulled up the floorboards. Look at that, he's gotten out his tools. He pulled out the floorboards one by one. But he didn't find the noise. So Owl went back to bed. This house has a noisy roof, yelled Owl. How's he getting? Kind of angry, it looks like. And he took down the roof. There, said Owl, no more noise and no more roof. Owl got back into bed, the stars and the moon shining down where his roof used to be. Good night, Owl, he said. You still see that little creature that's making the noise, the little mouse? But Owl didn't close his eyes. He didn't dare. He knew that any second he would hear the noise. He waited, trying to read a book, and waited, and waited, and waited. Now he can't go to sleep, can he? Squeak! It's in the walls, Owl screeched. I'll get you, Noise, Owl said, and he tore down the walls of his house. Wow. Look at, in all the commotion, there's that little mouse. But he found nothing. The cupboard was empty. The floorboards were pulled up. The roof was pulled down and the walls were gone. Owl went back to bed and he said, "Good night, Owl." How does he look? No, looks kind of nervous, doesn't he? And then he saw the mouse. Squeak! Owl smiled. He said, "Good night, Mouse." And they went to sleep. There's Owl and there's the mouse. The end. And the mouse says, "Shh." So it seems like Owl was a lot more worried about that noise than he needed to be, doesn't it? Once he knew what it was, he wasn't upset. He was able to go to sleep then. Maybe he shouldn't have worried about it quite so much at all. Well, that's our story about how Owl had a hard time getting to sleep one night. And we're going to make our owl in just a minute. But first, I've got an owl rhyme for you, okay? It's called, There's a Wide-Eyed Owl. Okay. There's a wide-eyed owl with a pointy nose, 2 pointy ears, and claws for toes. When he sits in the tree and looks at you, he flaps his wings and says, "Hoo, hoo, hoo." Okay, well, maybe you can do that rhyme with your family a few times. Then we'll move on to making our own owl. Let's make our owl. Okay, so this is how our owl is going to look when it's done. We're going to be gluing on some eyes, beak, feet, and wings that we cut out. But his feathers here, we're going to make with a stamper. Okay, and I'm going to show you how that's going to work. So here's how I made my owl. I drew his body onto a piece of yellow construction paper, and your grown-up can do that for you, and you can cut it out. Okay, and remember, you don't need to use the same colors I use for the owl, for the paper or for the stamps. Okay, you can use whatever color you'd like, or whatever color you have around the house. If you have only white paper, you can use your crayons or markers to color it. Although for the body, if you're going to be stamping on it, you might want to leave it just white, okay? Because the stamp will put some color on it. All right, so I made this white body. I made some wings. So your grown-up can draw those for you, or you can draw them and you can cut them out. You know, I tend to use black and white for the eyes. So I drew some little circles on the black and 2 big circles on the white. And your grown-up might cut this out, and either your grown-up or you might cut the big white ones out, okay? And then I also made some triangles to be a beak and some feet. Now, if you look at this upside down, the feet look kind of like droopy hearts, but they're gonna look like claws when they're cut out. And the beak is just a triangle. And I used orange for that. And again, you can use whatever color you'd like. All right, and the other thing we need is, we're gonna need a stamper, and what we're gonna use for our stamper is this piece of celery, a celery stick, okay? That's got a nice kind of a half circle shape that will look like a feather. When we put a bunch of them on, it'll look like feathers on the owl. Okay, so your grown-up will cut you a section of celery that will work well for you to hold. And it's really handy to hold it between your thumb and your first 2 fingers. You get a good grip on it that way to do your stamping. Now to stamp with, I had poster paint. I had some tempera around the house. So I mixed red and green because that makes brown. You might already have brown paint around the house, or you might have other colors you'd rather use. Okay, so whatever color paint you have around is fine. All right, and if you don't have paint, I'll show you a way to use markers. But first of all, I'll show you, I mix those paints in the bottom of this cup that I can just throw away. And then with my celery stick, I dipped in and I got some paint on the end of it. And that's how I'm going to stamp. I'm going to hold it like this. And I am going to make a bunch of stamps to look like feathers. Now you don't have to put them in rows like this. You can put them on there however you'd like. Okay? And I didn't do the whole thing because I wanted to leave some space for the owl's eyes and beak. But I did more than half of it, okay? And if you don't have paint at all at your house, you can take a marker and you can color the end of the celery stick, just like where you'd put the paint if you were using paint. And that will work. See, I used red. That'll work to stamp with too. Okay, so you can just take that and stamp with that. And when it gets dry, just put some more marker on. And the same thing with the paint. When the paint gets dry, you need to dip it in again and get more paint on it, because you probably won't have enough paint or enough marker to stamp a lot of feathers without re-dipping in the paint or reapplying the marker. Okay, and remember, you're gonna be the one who cuts out the feathers and the body of the owl and the eyes, probably the white part of the eyes, and any of the smaller shapes if you can do that too. So when you cut, remember to use your own scissors, your child's scissors, and put your thumb through the top hole, your fingers, not your eyes, your fingers through the bottom hole, and keep your elbow in next to your body, and there you go. Keep your thumb up when you cut. Thumbs up at all times when you're cutting, okay? And for your gluing part, after you've let the stamped feathers dry, whether they're markers or the paint, they need to sit for a little while and get dry. Otherwise, it'll be so messy when you try to put the other parts on. Okay, so once that's dry and you've glued on your black parts to your white parts of the eye, or if you don't want to glue them on, you can just color black circles on each part of the eye. Once the eyes are ready, you can glue the eyes on with a glue stick or with school glue. Okay, and once you've got those eyes on, then it's time to put on that triangle beak, those wings, and the claws, the little feet. And those I glued on in the back so they look like they're coming down from the owl's body. Once you've done that, your owl is all set to go. Okay? If you'd like, you can glue him onto a big square sheet of paper for a background, but you don't need to do that. I thought mine looked fine as it was. Okay, so that's our owl, and that's how we stamp using a piece of celery. Okay? I hope you had fun making the owl and hearing our owl story and learning about the letter O. Let's sing our goodbye song, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye, friends. It's time to say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody.